Hey, so it's coming up to the time where my kids have their birthdays 2 days apart, and I also have my wedding anniversary in that week as well. So that's two wedding anniversaries, my 10th and my 12th, where we were waiting on a baby. He didn't quite want to be born yet. But I thought, like this is the week where I start thinking about like back to their births and what tools helped and what I thought about it and all that kind of stuff. I've spent a lot of time talking and thinking about my births because I teach birth trauma. It's a big part of the work I've done, but this is a little bit different. So I thought it would be interesting, maybe fun, because someone was asking me about hypnobirthing recently, a client who's pregnant. And I thought, well, this is something I used to teach, right? So I used to teach hypnobirthing through Hypnobirthing Australia, through their program. And that was an easy kind of segue for me as a clinical psychologist because I trained in it. I couldn't just be that person who did it for myself. I wanted to actually train in it. And I thought, well, if it works for me and I try it out on myself as a guinea pig, then I will add that to my practice and help other people through it. And if it doesn't work, then, well, it doesn't work, whatever that means. But so I didn't just take it as a participant. I actually trained in it. And I taught that for a number of years, and particularly after I just had my kids, when I wasn't quite ready to go back to psych work or other things yet. So that's kind of something I taught on the weekends mostly. And I loved it. And it was so much fun. I just kind of couldn't keep doing all the things and I couldn't keep working on weekends. So it's something that's sort of been part of my journey and talking about perinatal psychology and mental health. But I thought it would be interesting because there's still tools I use from it. So this is not, and this is something I remember teaching to people at the time, it's not something that you learn once and then never use again. At least it wasn't for me. And I don't know if that's just because of my psych training or just, the coping skills I like to use or something like that. I'm just shifting in my chair because I've been sitting for too long, but I'll keep talking. It's fine. So yeah, I thought I'd come up with a kind of list of things that I found useful. Now, remember, it's mostly from the Hypnobirthing Australia program. There's different programs teach different things. And I've had clients and friends and other people who've trained in other programs, loved it. I'm a believer that people just find what's useful for them, but they are different for different reasons. So I can kind of only comment on my own experience as a person using it myself for birth and teaching it. And like a lot of these old hypnosis techniques, they're part of, I guess, training for mindfulness and psych kind of, there's so many things to do with trauma and hypnosis and anxiety and like just mindset stuff that all kind of like bounces off each other and fits together. So some of them might be a bit of a mashup. So the first one is, I don't know if it's called this in other programs, but in the Hypnobirthing Australia program, it's called the bubble of comfort. So it's a kind of as simple as it sounds in terms of a visual technique where you imagine yourself in a bubble. Mine was pink. I can't remember if that's from the meditation tracks that was used or if I just came up with that myself. But you're floating in that and you're safe and you're protected. And it's kind of like sometimes people use like a white light meditation. So you imagine yourself being surrounded by white light, something somewhere where you feel safe. And I returned to that. Like I used that in my birth. I found in both my births I needed something a bit stronger, but it was helpful and I still have used that. And I'll give you some examples of when I've used it. A few weeks ago, I had my eyebrow microblading topped up. And it's not like my most comfortable thing to have done. The noise of the tattooing machine, the sound of sorry, this is triggering, but like the sound of someone cutting into your skin, even though you're anesthetized and you can't feel it, the sound of someone cutting into your skin, it's not the most pleasant in my body experience. So I returned to that sense of like the bubble of comfort. I'm safe, like my body's safe, all that kind of thing. Sometimes people will refer to this as like a safe place visualization. I like to sometimes add in the visual, which I did, I think mostly with my second birth, where you have like a sage, like a wise person, or it doesn't have to be a person, or a protector guide. And this is used sometimes in trauma therapy and different techniques as well, where you imagine someone, it can be a real person, a made-up person, someone from a movie, someone you admire, who's there as your protector. So if you're kind of, a spiritual person, you could bring elements in from that. Angels, religious figures, whatever you're into. But, like it could just be like Bruce Willis. I don't know. Mine in my second birth I won't go into the details because it's potentially, too traumatic to share without some sort of trigger warning. It's fine for me to share. I've shared it many, many, many times, but I'm always mindful of re-traumatizing people. So I'll just say when my shoulder dystocia baby was having some trouble getting out, and that part where we had to get her out, I don't know if it was my subconscious or what it was, but had this image of like a circle of warrior women around me. And they were like, not people from this era that I ever recognized. They were like Vikings or something, which has been interesting for me because I have Scottish and Irish ancestry, but also as part of that, like an ancestry DNA test showed me they've got quite a bit of Nordic as well. So there's Vikings in there somewhere, I swear. So I found that useful to imagine the bubble of comfort and also the protector guides around me. Another example I'll give you that I've mentioned in my first book, More Than a Healthy Baby, which is about birth trauma, coping with birth trauma. During a breathwork session, I had like an image of like an old kind of cranky old crone, I want to call her. It was kind of just like, you can do this, like not very like loving, supportive energy exactly. It was just like, come on, get on with it. You can do this kind of thing. So she's someone who's come to me sometimes, just, like a sage figure, again, a wise figure who has this presence that makes you feel safe, makes you feel protected. So I'd add in that. Another technique I use is, we could just call it the filing cabinet. That's kind of what I refer to it as now. So in hypnobirthing classes, you use this for a fear release. So if you've got someone who's got particular fears about the birth, this is a hypnosis technique that you can go in and use to sort through some of those, so to speak, fearful ideas, memories, thoughts, sort them out. With the analogy that I like where, trauma is kind of like a messy filing cabinet, really. Like if you just shove things in, sometimes they go to the right place and they get sorted and you can find them. Other times they sort of start spilling out, they're crumpled up, they're not organized properly. So using the actual visualization, I guess, or meditation, you could call it that, whatever language you want to use, around going in and sifting through some of those things. And sometimes that can be sifting through memories and thoughts, like subconscious things that are hanging around that you want to clear out. So we, reorganize the filing cabinet, or we put them in an incinerator, like see the thoughts or the pictures or the words or whatever it is on a piece of paper, and then you put them in an incinerator and burn them or shred them. Or it can be used sometimes in like trauma work, again, where you don't have the time and the space to deal with something right now. So you're going to put it in like a safe, and only you have the combination, only you have the key. So it's kind of like a combination of that and the safe place, but it's like a safe place for your scary, unwanted thoughts until your next session, or until you're not at the supermarket, like dealing with a crying toddler or whatever it might be. So there's some techniques that I use. They're not necessarily techniques that you would use on your own necessarily. They were tools that you would teach, like supported. So having someone guide you through it rather than just starting to go into this yourself. But it is a helpful technique, and it's something I've used many, 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 many times since birth. Anchoring with smell is another technique that I would say I learned from hypnobirthing. So I've always been a bit of a bloodhound with smell. I have a strong sense of smell. And I think after having children, it's even stronger. I don't know if that's a thing, but it seems like a thing for me. So I still use techniques that I learned there to ground myself and settle myself in birth. Now, they're not necessarily the same smells. There's not so much, clary sage oil and things like that. But knowing the oxytocin response, that kind of like connecting and bonding and calming response that happens when you pair the smell of the top of your child's head, or the smell of your pet, or your husband's old t-shirt, or your partner's old bit of clothing lying around that doesn't like smell putrid, it just smells like them and it's comforting. like getting your own oxytocin bank topped up is a really, really helpful thing to do. And that's something I would recommend for anybody to use. Smell. Smell is the strongest association with memory that we have. So it's often the one that gets left out when we're talking about processing stress or anxiety or trauma or building connection, but oxytocin's pretty important. And if it's not for oxytocin, it's building in your adaptive, I suppose, bank of like pleasant memories. So I know, for example, like the smell of lemongrass will take me back to a holiday in Thailand where I felt relaxed and chilled and didn't have a care in the world. I'm sure I did, but it's a smell I've conditioned myself to. And breathing techniques, like I could go into this so much. I just want to see, I've made notes. What did I say specifically? I guess surge breaths is sometimes what they're called in hypnobirthing. So breathing specifically for contractions, there is a specific type of guided breathing to do with that. And that has been helpful because I guess if you've ever done hypnobirthing, a lot of the ways that people get you to practice is when you're in the bathroom and to learn the association of when you are feeling watched and there's no privacy, it's very difficult and sometimes painful to do what you need to do. So you need to feel relaxed, unwatched, and using like breathing, this concept of like breathing down, that's been helpful for managing other pain. Whenever I don't know, hurt myself, to remember not to like constrict and contract and tighten, but to actually do the opposite and kind of like let go and breathe down and breathe purposefully. Obviously, like this is a short segment. I can't talk you through all the breathing in it, but if it's something that you're interested in, I would say you will probably use this again with your own children as well when you're doing toilet training and all sorts of stuff. It's a very handy tool to learn different types of breathing for different things. So I've used that breathing, not just the relaxation breathing, but the controlled kind of breathing as well when I had laser eye surgery. So yeah, I was drugged up, but I mean, my vision before I had laser eye surgery was pretty bad. So I was in a situation where I couldn't see anything, and I had people saying, "Don't move, don't move, don't move, don't move," because you have to stay still. So that was like not a pleasant bodily experience. So what did I do? Use specific controlled breathing for that, which is partially what I learned in hypnobirthing, and also just techniques for like coming back into your body, which is a big part of trauma therapy and somatic experiencing. Sometimes they give you like something to squeeze, like just to kind of keep in your body and get rid of the tension because you're not supposed to move. So that was helpful. The other technique I still use and still like, which I attribute to hypnobirthing, I probably would have learned it somewhere else along the way, but acupressure, like hands down, probably one of my top tools for labor. It's how I got through to unmedicated births. Personally, whatever you did in your birth is up to you. It's not my business, but for me, that worked a treat for me. So counter pressure on my hips, some specific parts in my back that were really helpful, but one that I use a lot now still for nausea, anxiety, just to kind of ground me back into my body, is this point in here. So there's, I mean, if you're listening to this, go and look up the Hegu point, so Hegu. There's heaps of videos on YouTube. You'll find it there and you'll get a much better demonstration than what I'm probably going to do. But the fleshy bit inside between your thumb and your index finger, to go on top and just press into it. And you'll know when you've got it, because it will, with acupressure, you generally feel a little bit of a like, it's not painful, but it's just like, oh, that feels a bit funny. And then if you press into it, like you get a release. And so you'll feel, you maybe not feel it straight away, but with practice doing this, like you release beta endorphins. So they're the feel-good, happy hormones that are more powerful than morphine. Like that was something I learned in hypnobirthing. None of my psych training ever taught me that natural occurring beta endorphins, which you can access through acupressure, through smell, through breathing, are way more powerful than morphine. That's amazing. That's stayed with me ever since. So learn some acupressure. It's also good when you're stressed to have something to do with your hands, right? And to teach your kids things like whether that is acupressure, whether it's, tapping using the emotional freedom technique or whatever it might be. Super helpful to have something to do with your hands, because restless energy needs to go somewhere. We are still mammals after all. We still need to move. And then as a bonus, I also really liked, this is more like for a teaching example, I guess, but where is it? There it is. I still use this. So what I'm holding it's a Chinese finger trap. It's a gag toy. I guess that's originally maybe how it started, but it's really useful for teaching people how to let go, right? Emotionally, physically, everything. Because the idea is you stick your finger in, right? It's just a couple of bamboo pieces twined together. But if you try and pull it off, well, actually, I'm relaxed, so that's not a very good example. But if you try and pull it off and you're tight and you struggle, it traps your finger and you can't get it out. And so then it's sort of like, I guess, a bit of a metaphor for when you are tight and constricted and stressed, it's a lot harder for your muscles to release, right? So particularly with birth, your muscles, the muscles of your uterus need to be relaxed in order to do what they need to do for it not to be like agony, really. And that's, I'm not saying that as a comment on anybody's pain tolerance or anything like that. It's just the physiology of tight muscles are going to hurt. That's a no-brainer. If you are sitting like this all day, with your shoulders up in a Zoom thing, you're going to have sore shoulders. If you constantly spent all day contracting these muscles and never loosened them, they're going to feel tight, right? So the idea with this is you're teaching to breathe out, release, maybe give it a little push, right? Still not relaxed enough, probably because I'm talking, and then you get out. So yeah, I use the finger trap. I've used it with my kids sometimes to teach them about body tension and letting go. And I've used it with training other perinatal psychologists, particularly when people haven't been taught this information before because they've never trained in hypnobirthing or they haven't studied, midwifery or something like that. Understanding the muscles of the uterus or any muscles in your body, but particularly for when does birth often become unstuck? It's when people have fear, when they have tension, and when they have pain. And anything we can do to release, relax, not contract the muscles makes everything a smoother process. So that is a couple of techniques. What is that? 5 techniques and a bonus that I still use from hypnobirthing. And my last hypnobirth was almost 5 years ago. So if you're considering whether it's a technique for you, I would say to consider just being mindful about which program you choose. They're not necessarily all the same. Everybody will find something that is right for them. I'm personally not a fan of stuff that gets people into their frontal lobe with counting and things like that too much. We want to be turning off counting. I think breathing for just breathing and not counting the breaths, that's maybe just a personal thing. Thinking about maths does not make me feel relaxed. So I liked with the program that I taught and used that there wasn't an emphasis on counting numbers, 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out, anything like that. But also, if you're ever made to feel like you did it wrong or that you gave up too early, or sometimes you hear about the natural or nothing kind of messaging. There can be a kind of toxic positivity culture that exists in hypnobirthing communities, not all of them, but in some. I know there are, because I've heard stories of women and partners coming away saying I was made to feel like because I had a C-section or because I chose this or because I did or didn't do that, I didn't do it right and I should have tried hard enough. So I would say any technique that is claiming that you should do it exactly the way that you're told to do it and not use your own choice and use your own preferences, it's not what it was ever set out to do. This is supposed to help you, not make you feel like you did it wrong or you made a bad choice. So be discerning about that. It's all about empowering you and giving you a bunch of different tools and a bunch of different strategies, and not all tools and strategies work for all people. There are things from hypnobirthing that I went, no, that's not really for me. didn't appeal to me, so I didn't use it. But there you go. There's a bunch of tools I do still use. So you got to pick and choose what suits you. And I would say, I guarantee you're going to learn something that you didn't already know, because I learned stuff that I didn't know, and I already trained in perinatal psych. So